I'd say there's a couple key questions to help you identify this faster. And so the further you're able to get along in this, the better placed you will be in your career in general. Exploration followed by exploitation. It's valuable, especially if you're entering some sort of new domain, to explore a lot. Something that I applied to my own career was this concept of opportunity cost. Many startups, especially at the early stages, also have this concept of work trial, stock grants if you're working in big tech.
I really appreciate you taking the much more thoughtful approach of also pointing out that everybody's needs and desires may be different. Hey everyone, today I have Sarthak again on my channel. He also has a lot of startup working experience in general, so I wanted to kick it off first with who would you recommend startups for? Because startups might not be for everyone. There might be a college student who's watching this right now who might be in between of, do I want to be in big tech or do I want to be in a startup?
Startups are not for everyone. I'd say there's a couple key questions to help you identify this faster. The first question is, how important is having a large sort of paycheck and being financially secure to you? There's a lot of opportunity costs that you give up when you work for a startup, especially if you aren't aligned with their mission. There's stock grants if you're working in big tech. There's a lot of benefits that you don't get working in a startup that could make it not worth your while, especially if a startup doesn't go anywhere. The second sort of question to ask is, what is the sort of place that you want to be in your career 10 years from now? And what are sort of the skill sets that you can anticipate needing in order to get to that point? If you're interested in leading some sort of large team, working on some really cutting edge product area, being able to found your own company one day, the learning curve is just so much steeper in startups, and you end up picking up so many valuable skills that help you eventually become a multi-purpose person that's able to direct a larger team, that it might actually be a faster path to getting there than working in big tech and having to climb all these different levels to get to that same point. The final sort of question to ask about is, how comfortable do you feel working in some sort of established hierarchy where there's clear goals and directions versus how much do you prefer working in more ambiguous, less structured environments? So oftentimes, if you're looking to get mentored and almost groomed into some sort of role, ideally from someone that's been there and done that, that might not be an option for you in a startup where you might struggle to keep the lights on and you don't necessarily have the one-on-one time. You're almost expected to be proactive and pick up these sorts of things, as opposed to someone that appreciates more check-ins, more mentorship with these sorts of things. And so your ability to work on more ambiguous problems and more unclear scope is almost something that you get to refine more in a startup, which is also something that serves you well in more senior levels of big tech. And so there's multiple ways of navigating this. A lot of people start up in big tech, go to startups, and vice versa, as you grow in complexity in the scope of problems that you tackle.
I think that it's something that's really worth exploring. I hear a lot of stories about people who are in big tech for a few years and then they're like, I want something fresh. And so they go over to startups. And then I've also heard stories of people who start off in startups and then they learn a lot and then they're able to take a lot of what they learn going into big tech, because you have to do everything when you work in startup.
Exactly. As a general principle, something that I applied to my own career was this concept of opportunity cost. So I didn't really have that much to lose when I thought about starting off in a big tech company versus a startup, right? Like the differences in compensation were not super crazy, especially if you decide to work at startups that are a bit later stage than early stage startups. And so the opportunity cost that you give up in terms of financial compensation should ideally be something that you make up in terms of learning and the experience that you get working with customers, working on cutting edge problems. And that sort of compounds. So learning compounds on more learning. And so the further you're able to get along in this, the better place you will be in your career in general to really earn money if that's your goal, or to have some sort of larger impact. So for people that don't have these sorts of urgent financial commitments or anything like this path is something that I highly recommend to really optimize your learning, especially in early stages of your career.
I really also appreciate you pointing out it depends on what commitments that you have, because I feel like a lot of people, when they provide career advice, everyone is like, oh, in startups you'll learn a lot, you should just go there. So I really appreciate you taking the much more thoughtful approach of also pointing out that everybody's needs and desires may be different.
On the flip side, certain types of problems that really motivate you, that get you out of bed, could only be solved with the right amount of resources and scaffolding to help you with this, especially if you work in areas like LLM development and researching these really hard AI problems. Oftentimes the way that you run these experiments and answer these questions is by running these algorithms on these really expensive computing clusters. And that's not something that most startups have the luxury of doing. And so certain types of roles like this could also apply in sales, for example, if you're selling to large sorts sorts of enterprises, you might need to have a certain amount of reputation. This could also apply to engineering and more generally working on certain types of scalable multi-billion person infrastructure. That's actually only something that's possible inside of a larger company. And so if that's the sort of experience that you have that you're sort of interested in continuing it, maybe big tech is a better option for you.
So what do you suggest is the best way for people to find startups to be a part of?
So exploration followed by exploitation.
Okay.
It's valuable, especially if you're entering some sort of new domain, to explore a lot. So again, finding ways to minimize the amount of time that you spend on any sort of project and maximizing the number of reps is typically the way that you'll get a lot of signal into what the startup ecosystem is out there. So how does this actually manifest? A lot of people go to startup events, but they don't typically engage at a level that's meaningful enough for you to do anything. So again, I'm sort of biased because this is how I got to start in my career, but working on projects with certain startups, right? Either at hackathons, either at conferences, and getting to do some sort of meaningful work, ideally over a condensed time period. That's so valuable in terms of getting a perspective. Many startups, especially at the early stages, also have this concept of work trials, where you essentially get to shadow the team for a day or two, so you can take a couple of days off, just be in that environment. Gets you such a good sense of what it's like to work in that sort of environment. The other sort of area of this is being where other smart startup folks are. So again, we're very lucky to be here in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of activity happening in San Francisco with events and these sorts of conferences and these sorts of well-known organizations just here. So the more that you can go to those sorts of environments and really connect with people there, the better your ability to access that sort of pool of talent becomes. And the last sort of thing, again, is working on interesting problems yourself. If you have some sort of unique insight, having worked on some large-scale infrastructure somewhere, that's actually something that a lot of fast-growing startups that might be running into scalability problems could actually have themselves. And so you'd be a great sort of candidate to just chat about your experiences there. And similarly, if you're working on interesting sort of projects on your own, finding some sort of forum to show this, either again in maker fairs or these sorts of forums, and being social about your work, not just working on things by yourself, really helps you connect with other people that might be interested in that sort of area. And that's a very good channel to go beyond like a meaningful interaction with the startup community. And you can form deeper relationships, you can have more interesting conversations, and maybe decide to work on a startup with people you connect with.
Yeah, because I was thinking if I had no context around startups, I'd probably just go online and look for a job post.
Yes. I'll say one last thing. So geography actually matters a lot with startups.
Okay.
So because of how capital and talent tends to congregate in areas that have this, it might actually make sense for you to move out to certain locations that are well known for doing startups. So again, it doesn't have to be for your entire career, but finding ways to be involved in the tech community here in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, New York, or internationally. There's great tech communities in Bangalore, for example, or certain parts of China and East Asia and around the world. Going to a hub that is known for its tech community really helps supercharge your learning curve. And so maybe you can try going out for a couple of weeks if your work situation allows you to do that, and really get to experience this.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that information around startups. I feel like I learned so much as someone who's not very familiar with the space. So I really appreciate you talking about the little intricacies of working at startups depending on its funding stage, and also talking a lot about how the work changes and how to break into startups. Do you have any final words for anybody who may be interested in startups?
Yeah, so my career and where I've gotten to so far has been a testament of working with small teams that are working on interesting problems. And startups tend to be a great magnet for these sorts of self-directed people that have this desire to have some sort of outsized impact. And so, especially if you are looking to learn, you're in a position to take a risk with your career, and you believe that you have more to offer than what you're currently working on, I'd say working at a startup, even if it, again, doesn't have to be your entire career, but getting an experience to work with great people like this is something that you'll carry with you for the rest of your career. At the same time, I'd say right now with the market that we have today, there's a lot of opportunity with new companies being formed, especially when there's any sort of downturn or uncertainty. And with the emergence of AI right now, there's so many companies that are starting off that are working on these interesting problems. And so if you have the opportunity to take this sort of step in your career and explore connecting with different people than who you're used to, if you're open to moving and taking that leap, highly recommend giving startups a try. And again, you should not give startups a try if you want more structure, if money is important for you, if you think that you have a good sort of situation in your career right now, you've built trust with people and you see some sort of path to getting to a position that you want, it might be a better fit to stay where you are and instead get the sort of exposure by working on smaller projects and showing it to the larger community.
Yeah, thank you. Amazing concluding thoughts.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for watching.
Guys, isn't this amazing content? You really should like, comment, subscribe, and engage with Melody's content. This channel is going places, and I'm so excited personally to see where the channel goes.
Thank you so much for being a part of this channel journey. All right, see you all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.